Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. I think this is the best part of my day when I get to hang out with some of my favorite people on the planet. I get to hang out with Ellen Brown from BP2 Health. It's always a mouthful, Ellen.
It's a tongue twister.
We're going to have to talk about that sometime. And Carter Williams from iSelect Fund. It's always so fun on a Friday to get together, you guys, unpack everything we've learned, everything, we want to talk about from the week. And we also have a great special guest who's going to be joining us during the show, Eric Smith. And, Eric's in the background. So what I would say to Eric is, as the three of us are geeking out a little bit in these first 10 minutes, if we say something that you're like, holy crap, I've got to weigh in on that. You know what? Even before your segment, you are welcome to chime in, my friend, okay? And I'm Katie Stebbins. I run the Tufts Food Nutrition Innovation Institute. So welcome. So we'd like to start off by just kind of talking about what we read about each other's stuff this week, what we saw in the news. I just have to give a first shout out because I'm so excited about this. I don't know why I'm so excited about it, but I went to Bowling Green High School. That's where I graduated from high school in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And I opened my phone this morning, you guys, and it says, you're never going to guess. And it was like Apple News from Bloomberg. It was like, you're never going to guess where the highest per capita usage of Ozempic is. And it's not Hollywood. It's not New York. They're like, it's Bowling Green, Kentucky. And I'm like, wow, okay. And there's this great quote in the article. If you saw it, this beautiful woman says, we're redneck enough to be fat, but we're smart enough to get skinny. And I was like, that's gorgeous.
You're gonna have to send that to me. I need to use that quote.
That was just beautiful. So, but in all seriousness, though, I'm always inspired by reading these articles. So many people taking this medicine and having their lives changed. And one woman saying, not only am I not eating as much, but I stopped smoking. And, I'm now walking my Great Dane every day, and I'm getting out and I'm hiking and I'm planning trips I never planned before. I mean, I just continue. I'll let you guys comment, but I just think it continues to be amazing.
Why is Bowling Green that way, do you think?
I'd have to imagine it's it's not a small town. It's like third largest city in Kentucky, but I think it's just word of mouth got out. Oh, I know what it said. Oh, Ellen, you're going to love this. There are a lot of employers covering it. That's why. They said there were a whole lot of employers in Kentucky covering this, which made it cheap, which made a whole bunch of people go on it. Fascinating, right, Ellen?
Absolutely. It goes back to the economics. As we talk about this stuff, we have to acknowledge that people, how they have to engage economically with whatever intervention we're talking about is enormously important to what we talk about. And so, Katie, I'm not jumping from Ozempic. I'm going to tie your Ozempic point back to one of Carter's from his weekly lessons learned last week. He said, he made the point, and Aaron Martin, who's also, as everybody knows, very much part of this conversation around food is health, is can you take the same improvement to sort of that addictive quality of food, right? And that's part of what Ozempic's helping with, is that you don't have that same addictive level to some extent. Could we replace, and I'm really sorry for the noise, we're having horrible thunderstorm here right now.
Stay safe, girls, stay safe.
It's fine, I just saw a lightning bolt out the window. But so could we, when we talk about, and we have Eric, we're going to talk about this, is nutrient dense regenerative agriculture has a whole different taste profile than the conventional agriculture and produce that you buy in the store, right? It's totally different. And so can we also see regenerative agriculture, this nutritionally dense produce coming into us, whether it comes from the store or the farmer? Could that be like an Ozempic, where it changes people's taste profile and they're like, hey, this is good stuff, right? It's like a natural Ozempic.
Yeah, so building on that, the point I made on the post was actually related to something I said probably 8 years ago, which is, can we engineer good food to be addictive? And we had a little ethics question at that point. And so, but then I found out, and I got to trace this down, that there are certain things in regenerative that have, that this person claimed had addictive attributes to it. And then certainly you can imagine evolutionarily that taste, addiction, an addictive quality, let's say, and good nutrition, you can imagine evolutionarily that would make sense, that crops that you should eat more of would have that in some fashion. And taste is probably the best addiction, in a sense. I guess when we think about addiction, we think about drugs, but taste is an important part. And when you really think about the genetic engineering part of it, is we normally can engineer taste and nutrition together. And yield has always been negatively correlated. So as we've boosted yield in crops, we've lost taste and nutrition, and now we need to go back. But
Carter, what's interesting about that is I think about apples. So think about how apples have been genetically modified to be so much sweeter, right? So yeah. I've read so many articles about how the apple today, and there's so many varieties, right? There's just like tons and tons of different varieties of apple. And I love fresh apples during apple season. I eat them all. But my understanding is if you get a Honeycrisp apple, that's a super sweet apple, right? Yeah, and it's been engineered to be almost addictively sweet.
Right. And so I think that's the negative part. But we are getting to the point that I think when we're thinking about genetic engineering and even breeding, we can breed genetic traits into crops that otherwise people expected to be GMO, but we can naturally breed them. We're going to get to a point as this question about nutrition expands, that we do have to sort of ask the question at what level, just as we put those addictive behaviors in terms of fructose in apples, should we worry about too much riboflavin? And so it's something that's going to pop up. But I got a lot of snapback on the post.
Interesting. I don't know if you can have a riboflavin toxicity, can you? Isn't that one of those moments where your body just gets rid of what it doesn't need?
But we didn't think that their pictures I should post.
The new leading cause of death, riboflavin.
These very Mad Men-esque pictures that we could post from the 50s that showed, like, if your wife is not alert enough in the late afternoon, you should give her sugar. It's like one of those Camel's ads.
Wow, what's that code for?
And you're just sort of like, what ad person was awake the day that they did this? But they're actually pretty suggestive ads. So
wow.
It was a different time for sure, right?
It was a different time.
So there's one other one I want to hit on really quick because I think we're probably
real quick. Then we got to bring on Eric. Yeah, is
unless there was something else, Katie, but the other one I just have to say because I think it ties perfectly into what we're going to talk about with Eric today, which is like, can we get to the point where we eliminate the need for the primary care through nutrition? And
say that again.
That's a whole other conversation. Could you eliminate the need for primary care through nutrition? And you actually posted this, Carter. It was like part of your question of, there's such a shortage of primary care. And if we could embrace nutrition the way we need to embrace it as a culture, right, then as a society, then could we eliminate enough lifestyle disease that we would get to the point of not actually needing the number of primary cares that we do today. So whether we eliminate primary care altogether, but
sort of building on it, or the mode of delivery would even change.
Exactly.
If you talk to the AI people, they really see
absolutely
healthcare from a care delivery system standpoint, that AI is a way to improve the quality of care delivery. If you have a great PCP, they're great, but a lot of them decline for various reasons. And so AI can, to some degree, take something that's a fairly straightforward health thing and move it up. So that's one. There's a shortage of 35,000 doctors or PCPs. I can't remember now, but there's a shortage. And then, so we have an accelerating of technology, and then we have this opportunity where Ozempic is coming into the fray.
Yeah.
And there's a chance that maybe even grocery retailers, some of those people will think about, or you've got Hims and Hers, and those kind of care delivery systems are moving around, that all of a sudden you could take 80% of what a PCP should do.
Yep. And I have an idea for our last segment today.
Okay, we'll hold on to that. So I just have one closing thought on that, you guys. And I thought about it this week while I was catching this cold. And I thought, there was a time when we caught a cold and felt sick and we went to the doctor. And the doctor gave us antibiotics, whether we needed it or not, right? Oh. Yeah. And so, my ear hurts, my throat hurts, whatever. I'll just give you some antibiotics. You'll be great. And I think there's been so much awareness raising around the fact that that's not the right thing to do. Like, I don't call my doctor anymore. Even when I thought I had COVID, I didn't call my doctor. I'm like, okay, I can go take a test that I can have someone go buy for me somewhere. What's the doctor going to do? Antibiotics aren't what I need. And now I do more like, I'm going to double down on vitamin C. I'm going to have some herbal tea. I'm going to take care of myself. And by the way, there may be a trend in which our gut microbiomes are actually healthier because we're downtrending on antibiotics. I'd be interested to know that.
That is a good
And then how is this playing into the bigger roll up of how food and our guts and our health and everything and the relationship with the PCP? I mean, I have 2 kids, and I remember like the doctor would be like, oh, come in, and we would always leave with a bottle of whatever antibiotic. It was crazy. And I brought my dog in for an enlarged prostate this week.
Katie.
And the veterinarian gave me antibiotics for the prostate. I wouldn't give it to him.
My parents found my medical records from when I was a baby, the paper ones. I'm not kidding you. I have them. I'm going to do a post about this at some point. And they gave it to me and I read it. I consumed more antibiotics in my first 24 months of life. I no wonder I have had gut issues. I mean, it was profound. You would have thought I was like dying if you read these medical records. So,
right. Exactly. We'll hit on that at the end. That's perfect. So you guys, I'm so excited. Let's transition to have our guest for our podcast come and join us. We're going to have Eric Smith from Edacious join us. I learned about, I'm not sure, Eric, how you and I met. Somebody connected us, or maybe, I cyber stalk a lot of people. So, and I'll just admit that now. So it may have been that somehow you came up on something and I was like, went to your website and I was like, holy crap. And knowing me, I probably cold reached out to you and you were like, hey, come over and see where I work. And I was like, hey, sure. And I drove up to Marlboro and I met you. And then after that, I was like, this is like mind blown. Like, I just couldn't stop talking about Eric. That was like maybe 2 years ago. And Eric's now on our Innovation Council. And I think at least once a week, I tell someone to go meet Eric. So I'm really excited to have all of you meet him. So with that, Eric Smith from Edacious, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. And it's so good to see the 3 of you come together to host this. We've been, there's been so many conversations and I think this is going to be a huge hit. So just really grateful to be here.
Awesome. So Eric, dive in and tell us about Edacious. Do your pitch. Let everyone know how awesome you are.
Thanks, Katie. So what we're trying to do at Edacious is connect the dots between agriculture and human health. So there's a huge disconnect between these 2 communities. And what we're trying to do is use people's self-interest to encourage better land management and better agriculture systems writ large. So my background's actually in climate science, climate finance, and I've been working on addressing the root causes of our greenhouse gas problems for a long time. And I've become quite jaded with the solution set in terms of trying to identify ways to put in climate smart practices throughout the food system so that we can have a lower greenhouse gas intensity per food delivered. The problem is everything's been carrot or the stick. It hasn't been embedded in the system in which we produce that food. And so I had this aha moment in kind of putting my ear to ground as an investor, which was, what if we just focus on the biochemistry of the food and nutrition as that connective tissue between what we're experiencing as a polycrisis right now in climate and agriculture and environmental systems and human health and all the crisis that we're living in that domain. So very simply, what we do is we measure, compare, and share the nutritional quality of food. We treat food in this country as a commodity, meaning that milk is milk is milk, beef is beef is beef, and that could not be further from the truth. The truth is that depending on the breed, the varietal, and the genetics you use, the environment in which that genetics is placed, the environmental conditions around that place, you're going to get a different nutritional outcome every time. And the quality of that outcome is going to be predictive of human health impact and what it's doing inside your body.
Eric, I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you also mean between crops? Could you also mean there could be variation from crop to crop, even on the same farm?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It'll be minimized because those conditions are controlled when you're thinking farm to farm. But we're living in a very complex ecosystem, Katie. I mean, everything starts with genetics and fertilizers and inputs that go into a soil, out comes a crop. That crop is processed, stored, shipped, changed into a consumer packaged good. It ends up on a retail shelf and then it goes into your body, right? So depending on the complexity of that system, we're all getting different nutritional outcomes every time. And we have such a poor understanding of the relationship between these systems and what's going on inside our bodies.
Yeah.
The one other aspect I'll just highlight of what we do is, and this is getting into the technology a little bit, is how you measure nutrition in food is a very inefficient process. So we rely on the technology, analytical chemistry. It goes through various forms of mass spectroscopy. It's time consuming, it's expensive, and there's a whole range of different nutrients that we look at. Our technology specializes in using lights and lasers to drive down the cost of measuring the nutrition in food to make that measurement more accessible to the market. And yeah, Carter and I have a whole host of theses about how this is going to play out in terms of decommoditization and all of the immense arbitrage opportunities for companies that are ahead of the curve on understanding what it means to move from a system currently based on quantity and caloric output to a system based on quality and the nutritional density of the food in which we are consuming.
Yeah, I mean, Carter, talk to us about how you see that playing out in the market. I mean, I'm just interested in what does the economy of food look like as this plays out as a normalized path?
Yeah, so we are an investor in Eric's company, and he has been an investor in his previous life. He was an investor in some of the activities we had around soil health. So once everything in agriculture really has been focused for the last 70 years on yield per acre. And we're good at yield per acre. We're, 250 bushels. We said this last time, 250 bushels, went from 20 bushels of corn to 250 bushels of corn on a farm over the last 70 years. So once you can start paying attention to the nutritional attributes, omega-3s versus omega-6, if they're out of balance, you're going to cause an inflammation. If they're not out of balance, you're going to get a healthy condition. Once you can start having that conversation, then consumers might be making a different kind of decision about what they're going to eat. And once you make it really easy to do, they're going to have that conversation more often. So first and foremost, Edacious is going to bring that price down so those tests can be run more often. Once they can be run more often, they're going to be run by more people. They might be by activists. They might be by CPGs. But then what's going to happen is people are going to say, the omega-3s and omega-6s are out of balance in this meat. Someone's going to say, why? Well, because of how we slaughtered the meat, because of how we raised the meat, because did we grass feed it or corn finish it? And all of a sudden, everybody upstream is going to start shifting a little bit and realizing, wait a second, I can optimize to that. And then what we also will see is that people will pay more for it. If Nestle is doing pizza, which may not be perfect for you, but frozen pizza, and they want to be able to say, look, this frozen pizza's got more protein because we use wheat that's got more protein, then they're going to have to buy wheat that's got more protein and up the stream, or they might want more niacin in it, or they might want whatever. So all of a sudden that differentiation comes on. Now with commoditization, once you can differentiate a product, you decommoditize, then you can start creating other values. You can start price discriminating in the marketplace if you're in the economics world. And now all of a sudden you can find that some people want this and some people want that, and it becomes easier to do. And it's sort of triggered in many ways from what Eric is doing.
Yeah, I wonder, Eric, how do you view this transition impacting food waste at all? I mean, let's say the farmer has a whole crop of carrots and it turns out the carrots had a really disappointing yield on beta carotene. You wouldn't want all those carrots to get thrown away. I mean, I'm worried about, have you thought about how do we think about the risk reward in this?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to take a step back just to that notion of what is waste and input output, right? So in terms of systems design, what we're trying to optimize is how much energy goes into the system for what we get out of the system. And right now we get a lot of carbohydrates out of the system and very little nutrition out of the system.
Right.
And so what we're trying to do is build that measurement framework where we can take that yield per acre and make it a nutrition per acre measurement. So we know how we're optimizing output from the land based on the energy intensity of what goes in. What we do is we're positioning to work with a lot of environmental or ag related data providers so that we can say, here's the greenhouse gas impact per nutrition delivered. And that changes a lot of our thinking about what's happening in the agriculture system. And waste, the concept of waste changes as a result of that.
I might lose everybody in this part, but
then maybe I should ask my question. Maybe you should. Maybe I should just.
Carter's coming in for a landing, folks. Hold on.
When I started at McDonnell Douglas working on the F-18 line, we had a 10% defect.
That was right.
And 10% of the time we would have to do rework on the airplane to make it work, to make it meet spec before we shipped it out of the factory. Ooh. And that was the time that Six Sigma came online. And I actually learned Six Sigma from Bill Smith, the guy who invented it at Motorola, which is sort of interesting. But so we said, let's measure the bejesus out of the aircraft and understand where all the variability is coming up. And did a whole bunch of stuff, built Monte Carlo models, a whole bunch of cool stuff.
Oh, I like the Monte Carlo model. I built one of those
recently. You should try to do a Monte Carlo on an HP 720.
No, I was bad enough doing it on a behavioral health model.
Where extra memory cost $70,000. but anyway, so we did it. And the net result was we got the defect rate near to zero. We eliminated huge amount of waste in manufacturing because all the things that were quality problems went away once we got control of this variable leads to this variable leads to this variable. And that is what's going to happen in agriculture. It's going to be grinding for agriculture for a while, but the beta carotene thing will not be a bad crop because finally someone will say, you know what? The reason why that comes out is in part because of these genetics, in part because of these environmental factors, but also in part because of the soil. And what I used to blame the environment for actually was something to do with my soil health. And now that I've got my soil health under control, I've eliminated 70% of the variability, and what's left is maybe the weather.
Totally. Really so then, Carter, what I'm hearing then is the Farm Bill needs to allow for way more of this innovation and experimentation because a farmer's got to be able to have the price considerations and the market considerations to play, right?
Yes, which is a really, and again, this is geekland. Right now, there is a thing called carbon insets, which carbon offsets was, I'm Nestle, I'm worried about my carbon, I'm going to go buy trees in Brazil to offset my carbon. Carbon insets is, I'm buying wheat, I want that wheat person to use cover crops so it's in my supply chain. Once you have, they're skipping over ADM in that process. They're skipping over the intermediaries and providing a price signal to the farmer. Well, once you can't have, and again, geekland, you can't have innovation without price discrimination and with price signal. And so now all of a sudden Nestle right now is doing carbon, but there's no reason why Nestle can't use that same price signal for niacin or
interesting
protein. And once you do that, once you do that, then you've got price discrimination. Once you have price discrimination, you can find out who all the different customers are. They come in and pay their proper price, and then innovation occurs.
So then, Ellen, we start talking about the medicine in food.
So I have two things. So I'm going to sound parochial. Carter's going to geek out, and today I'm going to sound very I'm going to go way backwards. So I'm going to go back to the whole nutrition piece, and that's this whole food is medicine, right? And so if there's healthcare people that know me, so they listen to this, and they're like, why am I listening about carbon inset?
We could call them Carter
It is a Carter inset.
It's a Carter inset.
I know. It's like a new thing. But I'm going to go back to two things. One, actually, before I ask my question, Eric, I want you to tell the tree story about the Japanese guy, and please tell that, because I think it takes us to soil, which then takes me to my question.
Yeah. Thanks, Ellen. And so very quickly, I studied forestry. That's how I got into this space. And the notion between an American forester and a Japanese forester was an American forester would come in and look up and see what the yield of the trees are and how big they're growing and what the canopy looks like. The Japanese foresters, they come in and the first thing that they do is they look down and they test the soil to see what's going on. And these groups of co-investors would come together and they would see different behavior. And that could not be more true for how the system is operating today. We just look at the bushels per acre. We don't think about much else, but we should be thinking about the productivity and the biological base that sustains that productivity, which is the soil.
Which then brings us into health, right? Like, so for example, I would say, no offense, but 90% of the people in the healthcare segment that I deal with laugh at the idea of a microbiome, and they have no idea what it means. And it sounds like a really big word, and they have no idea that it actually ties into the health of our population and whether or not we will ever stop spending 4.5 trillion to 5 trillion to 20 trillion, or whether we will go backwards. So I'm going to tie it together and say all the way back to nutrition. So I think what a lot of people don't understand, and it wasn't until we had Carter on our podcast on the healthcare side that people kind of understood that you can take 2 pieces of broccoli, right? I'm actually going to use cabbage because I found a statistic about cabbage. You could have two bunches, not bunches, they're ball. What are they? Cabbage things? Like
heads. It's a head of cabbage.
So I have 2 heads of cabbage, and one head of cabbage was grown conventionally, kind of in these ways that were, right, we don't want to keep growing it. And then the other head of cabbage was grown. I'm just going to use organic just for this study, right? We could debate organic all day long, but those 2 things. And lo and behold, the vitamin C in the organically grown cabbage was 43% higher than the conventionally grown cabbage. AKA, to your point, Katie, I'm tired today apparently, is food is medicine. So if I go and buy, and that's not even taking into consideration that maybe that head of cabbage that had 43% less was old. So maybe it had no vitamin C, right? And the other one was fresh and it had 200% of the level of vitamin C. And we as a society are not getting, so not only are we not eating the produce, we're eating produce void of nutrition, right? Largely.
Right. I mean, Eric, I'd love for you to talk about nutrition decay and supply chain. I mean, I think about that a lot. And, that's a really good point, Ellen. You could be eating something that was even grown locally, but it's been stored for a ton of time.
Yeah.
And, it probably should have been frozen way earlier. And Eric, I'm assuming depending on the fruit or vegetable, nutrition decay varies. That curve is different depending on what you're eating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it depends on the nutrients, right? Because minerals don't degrade out of the food. It's more water soluble vitamins, fat soluble. It really changes. But so let me tie a few threads here and we'll connect some dots. But what we've experienced is systems designed the wrong way. So why do fruit and vegetables why don't they taste good anymore? Right? We've been optimizing for yield, more water. They don't have as much of the nutrition in it that confers that flavor and that taste, right? But, and then to Carter's point, we haven't had any type of measurement or metric systems that are accessible to actually see how much nutrition is in that food so that the supply chain and the consumer and the retailer can all say, oh, this is a better cabbage than that cabbage. And we can say that definitively because we have data to connect those dots. So then we have the compounding effect of if fruit and vegetables and meat don't taste as good, people aren't eating them and they're defaulting to the engineered foods, which are now full of things meant to trick our brains and taste good. But bringing it back to, and I always like to be honest with people that I'm talking to, Edacious is not going to solve the health crisis, right?
No.
We're one little
what do you
component.
Mean you're not going to solve the health crisis, Eric?
Katie's not a super fan anymore. Katie's not a super fan anymore.
I'd have to go cry. Okay.
But 4 components, and I think this is really important in the food as health, the food as medicine space, right? Level 1 is replacement. We have to get people eating different foods. Yeah. Level 2 is we got to get the toxicity out of the system. And you saw this week that the EPA finally banned one of the most common pesticides being used in our cruciferous crops, broccoli and Brussels sprouts and cauliflower. So even though you're eating all of your vegetables and you think you're doing a good job, it's loaded with these chemicals that are absolutely nuking your gut and destroying the ability for your gut to actually take in the nutrition that was in the food.
Now, see, Eric, you went down a rabbit hole that I was trying to stay away from. I was so willing. I wanted to run down that rabbit hole and I thought I'd get in trouble.
But that's level 1, replacement. Level 2, toxicity. Level 3 is nutrient density. And this is about the omega balance of the food. This is about the relative abundance of the health-giving compounds. And this gets into what I love talking about with Aaron, which is satiation, right? So when you're eating something that tastes good and all the nutrition's in it, it's signaling your body in a totally different way to say, hey, thank you. I got everything I need. You can stop eating now. And that's back to the start of this conversation about the Ozempic effect of taste and conferring proper nutrition in whole foods. That's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah. One of the things I've done, we've got this great farm near us called Volante Farms. And it's like, I always say it's like food porn. It's like the most gorgeous spread of vegetables you've ever seen in your life. And I get huge peppers this time of year, and I love the purple ones. They have these great light purple and dark purple ones. And I showed my family how to just eat them like an apple. Yeah. And at first they looked at me like I was kind of crazy. Well, they look at me like that all the time. But I was like, look, just grab it out of the fridge, eat it like an apple. And my husband has started doing that. And I'm really excited about that. I'm like, purple, it's got a lot of bioactives in it. It's local. You can eat it like an apple. It's a great snack. You can just grab it, right? You don't have to prepare anything. Some of that's just about behavior modification and habit too, and role modeling.
And that goes into the nutritional decay side of the story too, right? And so our modern supermarket and the way we think about our produce delivery systems and what that experience of eating food as medicine is when you're going to the outsides of the supermarket, I don't know that it actually is delivering nutrition. If it's an apple that's been in cold storage and harvested 18 months ago, that's just a sugar bomb. It literally is devoid of everything that was good of when it was harvested. So it's complicated. And this is true for
that's
leafy
still
greens.
Better than a whole lifetime supply of, juicy fruits or now and laters.
There's still fiber.
Again, so here we got to transition a little bit to the next part of this conversation, which is, okay, Edacious does what it does, and it's now detecting this stuff. What's the rest of the system do? What are the other innovations, Eric, that you see sort of interacting with this to deliver healthy food?
Can I ask a question around that, Carter? Which is that my question was going to be, will Edacious help with the issue we just talked about, for example, it's a sugar bomb, right? It's been modified to be a sugar bomb, but it doesn't offer the nutrition that you want. Well, Edacious is going to help with that. Yes? Okay.
Yeah. Well, so like level 1 and what Carter's asking is, let's assume that all of a sudden the insights become accessible, right? So the data, the presentation of that data is available to you as an eater, the retailer, the distributor, the supply chain, the producer, to make better decisions. So Carter's question is, what is the impact of that decision, or what is the innovations that can happen as a result of that? I think all of our genetic and breeding systems optimize for nutrition. I think we start processing food differently to optimize for nutrition. We design products differently to optimize for nutrition.
And we retail them differently.
And you sell them differently, right? And so you're going to walk into the store, and I promise you at some point, Whole Foods, I'm coming for you. You know it. In 3 to 4 years, there will be labels on the store that segregate the quality of the carrots. And it's just think about how crazy it is today. You go into the store, you have 2 options, conventional and organic. Half the people don't even know what organic means anymore. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know what organic means anymore? And it just blows my mind. But like, that is not how food works. We got to design for these carrots for these different levels of outcomes and have price signals attached to that.
Yeah, but at the same time, Eric, I worry about equity in that, right? Like right now, it really sucks that, a mom who's making ends meet can't necessarily get her kids organic fruits and vegetables when she knows she should. Like strawberries, or so many warnings on all the time on all these sites. But at the same, so I don't want it to also be like, here's the wealthy bougie food system for people with nutrition, and here's the really shitty, food system for everybody else that's a lower cost. We can't create that. We can't.
We can't. And so my only good response to that right now, and I'll be honest, Katie, it's something that keeps me up at night that I don't have a good answer for right now, because it's like one side's like a Tesla based argument of like, you got to build the nice thing to move the market. Mm-hmm. But honestly, what I think it does is, as the value of healthy, nutritious food increases, it'll put more farmers, small and regional farms back into business in a way that allows it to increase the supply, which makes it more accessible and local. But
do you think it could turn into, because this is something that's sort of recently been, I actually learned about this in Kentucky. Aaron and I took a field trip down to ARH. It's another thing, but Carter knows about it. Katie knows about it. But I learned about first, seconds, and thirds when it comes to produce. So back to Katie's question, right? Do we suddenly have a new sort of sub-market of seconds, meaning still the same nutritional quality? So, and I know I'm geeking out a little bit with this, but the produce that retailers want to buy, it's the prettiest produce, it's whatever, right? But then is there another market where a Dollar General is still getting the same nutrient dense, right? The best of the best carrots, but it's going to the Dollar General because it was the seconds. I mean, so they weren't pretty, but
the ugly fruit movement, the ugly food movement exists, and there's already secondary markets for it.
But do you see what I'm saying? Like, do we suddenly have a new sort of supply that we didn't have before? To your point, Eric, that farmers now have a different, they're growing for a different way than the way they are today, the different mechanism.
If we have the technology to differentiate, we will begin to grade differently, and grading differently will send the proper value to the proper markets. And so that information will flow. And so I think you have to increase the abundance to be able to distribute it in a proper way. But we're not there yet because we, as a society and a country, we don't value the benefit of produce. We just don't treat it as we should. So there's not enough and not enough places.
But if we subsidize it through food as medicine programs and produce prescription programs, then
it'll get produced.
Looking at the medicine and food, and I mean, in the healthcare system, Ellen, maybe they become almost like, I hate to say this word, medical grade food. I don't want to say that, but I'm like, is there the produce prescriptions? It's like, we're going to give you this food because this is like the most nutrient dense food.
I was going to weigh in, but Carter's ready.
When we went to Six Sigma in manufacturing, we then delivered cars across the entire value chain that lasted longer, were better, had higher quality at a lower cost. So you got to remember that when we do this, we're taking out waste, inefficiency. We're getting better price discrimination, which means that the people willing to pay something different for something are paying it. So they're just as people at the low end are paying too much for food that's not good. The people at the high end paying more for food that's not good. And so there's a combination of those factors that if we look at every economic thing, computers, cell phones, cars, that when you start drawing more data into this and then engineer things better, that you tend to get a better, cheaper solution in the marketplace. The second factor is, I strongly believe, Nielsen has data on this, that the consumer, when they shop, are looking for affordably healthy, and all they can find is low calorie cheap. And so at every part of the economic strata, there are consumers who are like, I'm going to buy this food, but I know I'm going to get unhealthy and it's going to cause a cost somewhere else. And so that calculus is in their mind, but it's not in the marketplace. And in the marketplace, I think what you'll find is that the consumer behavior will choose to shift in this direction, and price of food might go up a bit, but a huge amount of the cost of healthcare will go down.
Yeah.
Exactly, Carter.
Yeah, I'm not positive how it's going to work out, but every other market that we have, there's very little in any market where the better product doesn't end up driving price down and giving more availability to more people in the marketplace.
Well, and you guys know, I mean, my big driver, not just from a pragmatic, bleeding heart, I want to see everybody get healthy side, right? When I step away from that and say, what do I use my brain for? I think it gets back to how do we economically align our healthcare system, which today is based on sick care, how do we take that and realign it, come up with another model that is healthcare, but we align it economically so that it becomes cost effective for people to be healthy? Because the point Carter made was spot on. I know you didn't make it this way, Carter, but I'm going to jump on it, which is right now, it is cheaper, not in aggregate, but it is cheaper from a discretionary income perspective for most people to be sick than to invest the money in the food and the diet and the exercise up front, because their employers are paying thousands of dollars on their behalf for the sick care. And so therefore that's already invested on their behalf. They didn't have a choice in that. So I think if we can, when we, not if we will realign it economically so that I can make a choice and say, I want a benefit structure that's different. I want to get a 20% discount when I buy the most nutritionally dense food because I have insurance with XYZ. And I go to this grocery store that actually has the food labeled the way I want. And then I get this 20% discount because I've enrolled with this health insurance company. And this health insurance company offers that 20% discount because right, you know what I'm saying? So there's a whole bunch to unpack there, but you get the idea.
We're moving to a period where we can plot this out and like sit in a room and sort of say, let's whiteboard this. Or we're also moving to a period where once you have, this is why we're so excited about Edacious, once the data is available and anybody can get access to it, then they can use it to drive their entrepreneurship activities.
Yes.
And hopefully we're going to have 1,000 different companies coming at this problem in a different direction. Some are going to deliver it through grocery retail. Some are going to come in with new PCP programs. Some are, and 1,000 are going to come in, and 950 of them are going to go out of business in 4 years. But the 50 that are left are going to turn into the Amazon or the Apple of food is health.
Yep.
Or the Edacious.
And the Edacious. I mean, we're not going to tell you everything that's behind the scenes and our secrets, but the notion being that if you want to get to the finish line, it's almost better to have those 1,000 companies enter the fray and 950 of them disappear than it is to figure out the best way to get the price to work. And I feel we are at that moment in this industry. We are at that moment where these tensions are ready to get going, and it could be really exciting to see it happen.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, there was one other little fun fact before you transition. I know you're going to have our last little block here, but when I was trying to bone up to get ready for this episode, I read a statement, standard American diet would get an F for nutrient density. So I will just... I will leave that one out there. But we know how bad it is, but it's...
Finally, Eric has a way to grade whether somebody's got an F or an A.
There you go. Old school versus new school.
It's pretty amazing. And as Carter said, like, I'd love to see the whiteboarding. Like, as a city planner, I look at 20-year cycles, right? So we know we're not ripping the Band-Aid off everything. These are gradual systems changes over time. So there's no silver bullets. It happens gradually, and the market and the systems shift accordingly in the way they should. So, and you can't do that without innovation. So it's super exciting, Eric. I love it. So the last segment that we like to do is, I think we're going to have Ellen talk about something cool that she saw this week. But we're going to wrap it up by just finishing kind of the way we started, which is anything at the end we didn't get to hit on, but we didn't get to talk about. And Ellen, I know from reading your stuff, I'm pretty curious about this epic news. It's epic news. It's epic.
I know. I just loved that I could use the epic shocker or the epic news. So for those on the food side listening, epic is really kind of the epic electronic medical records, electronic health records, the acronym of EMR and EHR. It's kind of the big player, the gorilla in the room. And government put into effect a new exchange council, we'll call it. It's called TEFCA, yet another acronym to learn. But it started a while ago. And one of the biggest things that has come from it was announced last week when Epic announced that they will let, drumroll, us as individuals say that we want our health data, and we can then say we want it put on XYZ app. So I can go to Epic and say, I want all my stuff, or I won't have to go to Epic, right? But basically there will be a way for me to say this really cool app over here that is going to actually do something for me with my health data the way I want, not the way it's been done for decades, right? I can control that.
Totally. But Ellen, so if you're Apple Health, are you not just going like, holy crap?
Well, Apple has been dabbling in this for a long time, and they've been pretty clear that this isn't really where they want to play. So we kind of debated that a little today.
Because they've got all my health data, right?
They do have all your health data, but they don't have the EMR data.
Exactly.
But you know where I go, actually, Katie, is exactly what Carter, I took a note so I wouldn't forget. But when Carter said, when data is available, innovation will happen. And that to me is what this is all about. There have been tons of innovators in the health tech, in the health
Digital
data
health,
tech space. But it was interesting. So we had a debate earlier today. We did a LinkedIn Live with Brendan Keeler, who's really, really knowledgeable on this space from a healthcare perspective. Talk about geeking out. But he made the point that this has been going on for decades, exactly what we're talking about, but it's been more on really sick people. Because companies have come in and said, I'm going to get the data, right? And they've figured out a way to get it through interoperability, because it's not like this is happening overnight. Like, this has been moving forward for a while, but it was the sick patients, right? That the puck needed to move. So these tech innovators came in, they'd pick a certain sick population, they'd figure out how they get their hands on the data. They do something when they go. The difference is now it's going to be democratized. And so think about the power. I mean, we're all health hackers on this right here, right? Imagine when I could just be like, hey, I could put it all over here and forget the health system down the street that I have to be beholden to right now, right? I'm going to use this other startup that has a whole different way of delivering care. I don't have to go to the doctor anymore. I can engage virtually. I can use behavioral nudging, and all the data that's been out there circulating forever gets dumped in, and algorithms can be figured. I mean, it's spectacular on many levels.
So this has actually been a project in the background of our minds unsuccessfully for the last 10 years, which is you should be able to donate your data to science.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? If you're trying to build AI, you need data, you need training data of sick and healthy.
Absolutely.
Right.
So that you have a control. And if there's been conversations around what we refer to as synthetic control arms. Well, if somebody does an Alzheimer's drug and it fails, where does that data go? It just doesn't get used. That should go to alzheimers.org as more control.
Right.
And
absolutely.
And the sort of longitudinal data starts to matter. And the that group that's doing MRIs and just said, hey, if you let us use your data, we will give you a discount on a whole body MRI. So they go out to the worried well.
I just had a call with their CMO. He was a client of ours at a health system many moons ago, and he now is the CMO of the startup. And we had a whole conversation about data with this.
Well, exactly. So it strikes me, and you tell me I'm wrong, they're going to be collecting a lot of healthy data, and then they're going to be able to normalize that and use it to help train AI. And so all of these things are finally starting to align. And we got another 5-10 years out of this, but it's going to be fascinating because they're going to we're already seeing companies that are starting to correlate the data much quicker once they get data, healthy data.
Well, and then bring in the stuff that Eric's doing. I mean, then you're able to also upload what you're eating, but not just recording your meals, but maybe recording the nutrition density of your meals. I mean, if we're able to capture that, you're really starting to be able to capture a lot of interesting information. And then, like at Tufts, we've got a guy who for a penny or two can put sensors on you on a Band-Aid. He spoke at our event that I think you guys were at, and he can test for all sorts of micronutrients in your body to see what's going on. So this all starts to loop together, right, to some sort of amazing digital twin bot.
Well, it also, so Carter, the other thing I've been trying to sort out in my brain with this is data as a new health currency. So like right now, data has value to investors, right? Silicon Valley sees the data as value when it comes to AI, because the data is what creates the value of the future AI models, right? The more you have, the more valuable it is.
Henrietta Locke, or what was her name? Who gave her plasma, and it was used.
Henrietta Locke, yeah.
Yeah. But so, okay, so now we talk about healthcare, right? We've never seen data really as a currency in it. And so
She didn't
now
give
if
it, by
you,
the way, it was taken from her. But okay, sorry, keep going.
No, but now imagine that you can give your data
Let's
in
just be clear. Yeah.
well,
microdoses, and then it's
right.
integrated
But
into.
it's also how does that currency start to change the way we look at healthcare costs? So like if I'm handing all, do you see what I'm saying? Like I've been trying, I know I'm getting very esoteric, Katie.
Well, I'm
or
sorry.
Eric, sorry.
There's a bad part here, which is
Yes.
there's a bad part, which is because we know, hey, they have this data and we can make a correlation about it. We know that you're in a risk category and that we're going to.
Well, right now our insurance protects us from that.
Bias.
Right. Well, right now our insurance protects us from that because that is the beauty of ACA. People love to diss Obamacare and ACA and say we need to do without it, but it is protecting everybody that is not covered by a large employer. Small employers included no longer have medical underwriting as a result of ACA. So exactly what you're talking about, Carter. So
I don't know how to solve that problem, but
I know. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm sorry, Katie.
But this is an interesting first step, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen with this. And
I think it is.
I felt compelled to try and track down all my data.
So let me just take this a slightly different direction. So we have your health data. Then we have Eric is paying attention to your input data of what you're eating.
Yep.
He understands the nutritional density. And then our friends at Brightseed have a in silico model of human so that they can understand how nutrients convert into humans in silico. And they understand what nutrients affect that. Mm-hmm. And then we go back to our friends at Meritera. Meritera has got Raman spectrometry, and they're able to look at leaf and soil to understand the expression of nutrition as a result of what's in the soil. And then we go back to our other friends. I'm sorry, I'm going through our portfolio.
At Bex? Are we going to go to Bex too? We got to go to Bex.
Friends at Orthoptics, who on a broad scale able to look down, is the guys looking down. They can look down in terms of the Earth with ground penetrating radar, and so that it is reasonable to start to think about the fact that we can tie that entire channel from dirt, soil, all the way through the expression of nutrition, all the way through to the human condition of whether there's a progression of high blood pressure or inflammatory disease, that we have the raw tools in each one of those segments at this point. Companies active making revenue, and the data is going to come together. I don't know. It'll be abused. It'll be used in different ways, but then know.
Well, and I think it's got to influence the total climate picture too. I mean, that's where you started. We talked about. Look, I go to so many climate conferences, and you talk about food being a villain, but nobody wants to talk about nutrition. I go to nutrition conferences, everyone's talking about food, but nobody wants to talk about climate. I'm like, folks, there's a whole group of us in the middle that've got to figure out how to solve both at the same time, because this doesn't. Food is the number one cause of death in this country, and climate is killing us pretty fast too. Like, we got to figure this out. We all got to get in the same boat. And I think this is a knitting together of a multiple of solutions coming together. I mean, like I've said before, I'm so happy to be alive right now, because witnessing the unfolding of humanity right now is pretty spectacular. Yeah.
It is.
Any closing parting words that we have from the peanut gallery? Eric, you're our guest. I want to give you a chance to say anything in closing you want to say.
And I'll just say thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to have these conversations. We're going to be out talking more publicly about what we're doing and kind of sharing the data and the insights that we're generating. It is a very exciting time. Nutrient density is a very hot topic. People are locking on, but I would say, there is back to that replacement thesis about getting the toxicity and getting more nutrient, like just switching to fruits and vegetables is going to do a good job. And so I want to, you want to push back on that?
No, I want to build on that and say, this is our golden time. This is our golden moment where people have realized that lifestyle disease is going to bankrupt healthcare I mean,
Yeah.
that's not like a surprise.
And it's not going to make us any healthier.
No.
Right.
And so I think this is that beautiful
Golden moment.
window where we have to be as concise and powerful as possible and educate the right way. And I think the same way, Katie, you brought up food as medicine, through food prescriptions, and that is such a myopic lens that our industry is using right now. It's great that it's gotten it under the radar, but this idea that we're going to prescribe it to people with food insecurity and people that are at a certain economic level or whatever, we all need to see food as health, as the currency that we need. And so, Eric, to your point, as that becomes part of the healthcare system,
Yep.
we need to figure out how to message all of those tiers, right? But very succinctly. So metabolic disease needs to be reversed, but then nutritional density needs to be a part of that equation. Katie's laughing.
I'm laughing because Ellen can go down a healthcare rabbit hole at a closing in 5 seconds flat and turn it into an opening. Carter,
there's the ending.
You're amazing. Any last words, Carter?
Right now, you go to a grocery store and it's hard to make a good decision. After we get done with this, it will be hard to make a bad decision.
Amen. Ooh. All right. So once again, Ellen, Carter, and our friend Eric Smith, this was so much fun hanging out with you guys on a Friday. Everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.